And I understand what you're saying, Gary, and particularly where Main Street is concerned, and this would, in cases, fall under the condition of community event closures. But my feeling falls back on the neighborhood block parties themselves, and I think Walter brought up a good point, that put up more roadblocks to do it, charge more fees to do it, and there will be less of them. And the neighborhood block parties are the ones that I mostly have the concerns about.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. Yeah, Wayne, I think that the spirit of this, Gary really hit on it. There were a few things that, as we constructed the policy, I think we had a very similar sentiment among staff as we looked at the block parties, because what we didn't want to have, we recognized the value in community cohesion and the ability to get with your neighbors and have a barbecue. And what we're also faced with as staff saying, okay, here are the liabilities, and so we want to make sure that the council's aware and that decision lies with the council, so that as staff we're not looking at that and saying, we're comfortable with this, when it's really not our role to make that decision, what we're comfortable with as far as that goes. The Main Street, we recognize that Moscow is really uniquely set up with our Main Street to be able to do really nice events. We have a couplet, we have alleys on each side. Main Street lends itself to closures for events like this fairly well, and we've worked to try and expedite that process and make that as palatable as possible. But also, as has been mentioned, it's gotten to the point where we've seen a drastic increase, especially over the last couple of years, in applications for this, and we realized that we really needed to have some parameters so that we knew what we can say yes, what we can say no to, and we really wanted the council input for that. And so that's what led to the generation of the policy, was so that we could try and determine a very easy, streamlined way. One of the complaints we received from applicants for these last year, especially for like the event closures, when an applicant wanted to do a band downtown, we'd have them get the application, and we'd say, okay, you guys have to get certified traffic control for this, you're going to have to hire a firm. And the feedback that we got from multiple applicants was, I don't know who to call, I don't know who to get to have come do this, I don't know what's certified, I don't know what any of this means. I would so much rather have my permit fee be higher and just know that it can be taken care of. You guys know how to do this, and you guys could take care of this. And so that was one of the reasons, especially with the event closures, that we took another look at this and kind of resuscitated the policy.
Okay.
Maybe just a couple more points in response to the question about what has happened. Well, it's just grown, and we see an expansion of the desired closure times. It used to be that if you were done at 10 o'clock, you're off the street at 11. Now they want to run to 11. They want to run to midnight. Pretty soon it's 2 a.m. And the times just keep getting longer, and the events, just having more impact. And, not only to the neighbors, but also to city operations that go along with that. So it's really a compilation of things that we've been doing and trying to package it in a way that provides that consistency and predictability for all the applicants, and making sure that as staff we are being consistent in how we respond to all the different applications. Because honestly, we were at a point where something would come in and it's like, oh, we got this big event we want to do in August, we want to close it for starting on Friday at noon, and we'll open it up again Sunday evening. So, okay, how do we react to that? How do we respond to that? So we'd gather all the departments together and we'd talk about it. It's like, okay, well, what are the parameters we're going to follow? Is this allowable or not? What's the impact? So we were struggling a lot with those types of questions because we're seeing more and more of those kind of requests coming through. So this is, again, intended to give us some guidance on how to address those, fully recognizing that, it's a policy, and if there's some overriding reason that, what's in here doesn't fit, great, we bring it back for a conversation and have the discussion about, okay, should we allow something that's different than what's in this for this event? And if so, great.
Well, the whole presence of this being a resolution, it affords council can act on a as basis situation comes along. It isn't set in stone. These 6 counselors can make a decision coming through admin, whether on something new or a one-time event or whatever it may be. They're going to have to approve it anyway. So, to me, having a resolution in place is fine and dandy, and I think we should have this, of course, but it can be adjusted each time. in a different manner. It doesn't set a precedent that this is it set in stone and this is the way it's being done.
It would be the normal operating procedure, and again, that's going to handle 99% of the events that come through. But it's those occasional, unusual ones that don't fit the normal parameters that perhaps would need to be elevated to further discussion.
Your Honor, if I may. I think one of the sticking points, and Walter hit it, several of you have hit it, is what to do with the neighborhood block parties. I think realistically, as Les indicated, if you're going to go out and get insurance from 160 to 300 and a quarter, people aren't going to do it. So you have to weigh the risk. I've found that a good, and the city attorney can disagree with me if he likes, but realistically, what you're looking for is that someone takes some responsibility for what they're doing. So I would recommend a release and an indemnity, which would allow whoever's putting the event on to say, okay, I got to kind of watch what's going on here because, if except for the city's own negligence, I'm essentially putting myself in their shoes. So something like that, it doesn't cost them anything, and they can choose to get insurance if they like, but that may be a nice compromise for those neighborhood events where you want neighborhoods to have some fun. The downtown and the commercial, I agree. I think they need to be fully insured, as we do now for Rendezvous, Hemp Fest,
Renaissance.
the Renaissance Fair, all of those things. So that might be a good deal. One of the things, Your Honor, that you stated that this is council policy. If you pass this, and what you're saying is this is how we expect the right-of-ways to be administered. If something comes up, there is some flexibility in there, so staff can regulate it a little bit, use some discretion. But if there's something that comes up that just doesn't fit in, certainly those folks can come in front of the council if they like, but at least staff has the ability to say, this is how council has told us they want the right-of-way to be administered.
Walter? Come back to
Les, there seems to be a little bit of possible conflict between the terms right-of-way and roadways. Is a parade that stays on the city sidewalks, which are public right-of-way, correct?
Yes.
Is that covered under this? Because, and the reason I ask that is that item 4A, parade closures, speaks to closures of Main Street and other major roadways. It doesn't speak to sidewalks.
Right.
Yet, right above that, in the last sentence of the previous paragraph under procedures, it talks about application approval shall result in the issuance of a right-of-way use permit.
That is
Do
the
we-
name of the permit, is a right-of-way use permit. That's our standard
So
name.
my question is, does it apply to an organized parade using city sidewalks and crosswalks?
In the background section 2, the last, third paragraph, it talks about that a right-of-way permit is not required for a march or parade on a public sidewalk which is not of sufficient size to constitute a public assembly. So the short answer is no, but it goes on to then say, however, the city requests notification of events to ensure public
Okay.
safety and event participants. The idea there was that exactly what you're describing, and we get a fair number of these. People want to gather at Friendship Square, they want to go on the sidewalk, and they walk out to East City Park, for instance. That's fine, and
And this would
we
not,
would
this
ask-
would not apply to that?
this would not, they would not be required to get a permit under this policy.
Okay.
We do ask that they let us know, just so we can be aware of it, so if, there's something going on, we don't
If you
run
get,
into conflict.
if the city gets phone calls, they've got an answer.
Right, or it may be that there's something already permitted, and this would conflict with that, and so we have to kind of weigh that. The other aspect of it is that if there, and we see this also, fun runs come up, and they want to run on the sidewalk, well, that's great. But what happens when they reach Mountain View, and they want to cross Mountain View? Okay, so we're saying that, okay, if you're going to cross major streets, then you would need to go through a permitting process, just to make sure, we can make sure that the traffic control is appropriate, or if there's police presence required to manage traffic, then that's taken care of. But aside from that, if you're running down the sidewalks, that's fine. You're not required to get a permit under this policy.
So you don't feel there are any conflicts in here that are not explained in some part?
Well, I won't say never, because people surprise us all the time with the things they come up with. But I think we've covered a very large percentage of what we see come through the door.
Okay, thank you.
Art, I was going to say, I was pretty good with it. I like the idea of not limiting block parties and people like that to having to buy insurance, because that would certainly quash those, and just operate under the waiver of liability. And also with Walter's stipulation about exempt the city from its own permitting process, because that sounds like a grossly needless waste of time and effort on the part of the city to permit itself. But other than that, I think we just have to press forward and not try to kick over every bushel basket that's out there to see if anything's underneath of it and see how it's going to go. And I think that this would provide the city staff with the guidance they need to operate clearly and predictably on behalf of the people.
Walter?
One last, I hope last, question. Back on the, not intended for direct commercial gain by the applicant. And then somebody brought up, a band selling T-shirts. I have been to some, well, actually, very recently, a event of a group who I'm sure charged a fee to make the presentation, but the public was allowed to come free, and their biggest pitch at the end of the day was, don't forget to go out and buy our CDs out in the lobby. It was obvious to me that they weren't doing that just to make sure that you would have more of their material. They would make a profit off those CDs. So I wonder if the wording that we have in this regarding direct commercial gain, and then I think it was Gary's comment that, well, selling T-shirts is not really direct commercial gain if we're not a little at cross purposes there.
You want to answer that, Rod?
I would just say, we might be able to correct that by just saying that the primary purpose is for not direct economic gain, but incidental
Incidental, I like that.
incidental is allowed.
Recognize that they're going to make some money.
To capture
but-
that intent.
And recognize they might make some money off that kind of thing, but it's okay.
They're not charging admission.
It's not the primary purpose of the event.
I think that could do it.